Welcome into the Alabama postgame show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. I'm Simone Eli alongside Matt Scalisi. This one just went final a couple moments ago. Alabama blows out Southern Miss as expected, 63-14 the final score, and what a lot of folks would say was a picture-perfect day for Alabama. At home, night game, the first night game at Bryant Denny Stadium. Bryce Young, extremely dominant. A lot of good things, Matt. The exact type of tune-up that I think Nick Saban was hoping to see before jumping back into SEC play next week against Ole Miss.
Yep, this is definitely much more like it in terms of what Nick Saban's been wanting out of this team so far this year. This is not the Mercer game. This is a much cleaner performance all around from Alabama. Good things on all three phases of the game. You know, I think Southern Miss was outmatched, certainly, and they were missing a couple of key players. But, you know, you still want to see the team execute and not make mistakes. And they were much, much better at doing that today than they have been in the first three games.
Absolutely. Quickly want to talk about Bryce Young and his performance. About as perfect as it could get. 20 of 22 for 312, 5 touchdowns. The interception, man, I think he would love to just not have that one go the way that it did. Totally not on him.
No, not at all. Yeah. I mean, I think for sure about as good a performance as you can imagine from a first-year starter. I will say this. I think that he seems like he's getting a little bit more comfortable with his receivers. Not that he was struggling so far this year, but I think there were a few moments in those first three games where they didn't quite look in sync yet. They looked like they were still trying to learn each other's tendencies. Much, much sharper today. He was hitting guys in stride a lot better. The play execution just seemed a lot tighter. We saw, you know, the tight ends were heavily involved in the passing game today. And then obviously, you know, when you've got Jameson Williams going off like that, it really reminded me of last year where it felt like every week there was another player for Alabama that was having a big game and became the unstoppable guy that week. And today was Jameson Williams.
Yeah, he set the tone very early with that 100-yard kickoff return to open the game, had another kickoff return, had an 80-yard score. When you have weapons like that, your job – it's pretty easy, but Bryce Young does a pretty nice job of connecting with guys as well. The rushing attack, I felt like more in sync with what Alabama is looking for when it comes to the ground game. Roydell Williams out of Hueytown High School, 110 yards on the ground on 11 carries with a score. Just seemed like an overall Jace McClellan, 97 yards. It seemed like overall very solid, balanced attack, if you will, when it comes to the offense today, but 212 on the ground overall, Matt. Just better, I guess, run game, more of what Nick Saban, Bill O'Brien would like to see from that part of this game.
And without Brian Robinson, too. They rest him after he got a little banged up last week. I don't think it was a case where he couldn't go. It looked like he was in pads and ready if they needed him. But, you know, to have the depth that this team has at the running back position is just such an incredible luxury, and we've seen that multiple times over the years. But this is one of those great groups. This is one of those groups where they're 3-4 guys deep with players that could probably start for most programs in college football, and they all, I think, bring something a little bit different to the table. But was great to see Roydell Williams really have a breakout game. We haven't seen a lot of him so far this season, but really looked great in his action in this game. And then obviously Jace McClellan is just such a dynamic athlete. So it kind of feels like Alabama's hitting on all cylinders on offense going into a game where they're really going to need everything they can bring to the table to beat Ole Miss, if last year and this year so far are any indication.
No doubt. That's about everything you got to say offensively. Defensively, we're already getting some comments from some folks. From Scott White, you see saying you see this here, and then the defense playing so out of position, according to Scott White. It blows my mind that Goldie makes no adjustments. Obviously, you know, everyone's a coach. You know, everyone has their criticism, but there is no doubt that next week and what Lane Kiffin can do, the type of numbers that Matt Corral and company over there can put on the board, it can get pretty scary, Matt.
No question. And look, I will say this. You hold an opposing quarterback to 131 yards in the air. the team as a whole to 82 yards rushing. It was a good defensive performance.
Yep.
And on top of it, we're talking about a game in which Alabama scored 63 points and thus gave Southern Miss a lot of possession. So this defense was on the field a lot tonight.
Yep.
In terms of per possession. This was really a very good defensive performance. I know people don't like to see points at all being scored by the other team, but for the most part, I would say this is probably the best defensive performance we've seen from Alabama so far this season. I thought they looked a lot more disciplined than they did against Florida. Easy to do that with when you're facing athletes that aren't quite as strong. But, I think that this was an offense that did a lot of the same things Florida did. There were kind of run pass options and option runs involved in this offense. Sure. Alabama had a focus on blowing up the mesh point in the backfield. And Will Anderson was the guy that was doing it all night long. But, I think this is a defense that is capable of disrupting opposing teams in the backfield, of creating negative plays. Mm-hmm. And I think that's going to be really crucial against Ole Miss. You're just not going to keep Ole Miss off the board. You're not going to shut them out. Go ahead and let that idea go out of your mind. You're not going to blank Ole Miss. But every drive is important in a game against a team this good. And you're going to have to blow up some drives. You're going to have to force some stops and punts and field goals. And the way you do that is negative plays. And I think so far this defense has shown that they are capable of generating those big negative plays against a team like Ole Miss. And that can be all it takes sometimes.
Yeah. And, one thing of note when it comes to Ole Miss and preparation and Lane Kiffin, their last game, September 18th. So that Lane Kiffin is dialing up everything and then some for Nick Saban and Alabama. They've been preparing for this game probably before the season even started, but there's no question that having that bye before going into a game against Alabama is critical, is crucial, is so beneficial to an Ole Miss team that is already put up 43, 54, and 61 ranked, and it's just unbelievable. Ranked 13 in the country. That Lane Kiffin is preparing for this game like it's the last one he'll ever coach.
He's been preparing for it probably since the day after last year's Ole Miss Alabama game. No doubt. He knows this is a very, very important game to his program, to his fan base over at Ole Miss, but it's also the easiest way to get yourself recognized and noticed and respected in the coaching profession is beating Nick Saban in Alabama. It happens so rarely, and when you do it, your name is on the map. You are all over everybody's tongues in the sport. And Lane knows this is a huge moment for him and an opportunity. He's also playing with house money because nobody expects Ole Miss to win this game. Yes. Nobody's going to criticize them if they lose. So they can afford to be daring and take chances and be risky. So yes, Alabama fans would be right to be nervous going into this game. It is the kind of situation that makes them uncomfortable, and I understand why. But I also think that this Alabama team has all the tools they need to continue scoring beat for beat with Ole Miss, and to create stops, to create disruption in that Ole Miss offense. You don't have to do it every single drive. You just have to do it a few times, and that can be what you need to win that game. So I obviously do not know how that game is going to turn out, but I think that this Alabama team has the tools it needs to beat Ole Miss.
Yes, and speaking of tools, one tool they're going to have is being in the friendly confines of Bryant Denny Stadium. If you're just tuned in, the Alabama Postgame Show, Bama coming off a huge win over Southern Miss, 63-14. Matt and I talking about next week now and Ole Miss coming to town. This is a different situation than what we saw a week ago with Alabama on the road in a very hostile environment. Bama fans know how to behave when the Tide's on offense. They know what it takes to, make sure that their guys can hear, cadence, snap count, whatever it needs to be. That is beneficial. That is going to be huge for the Tide to get it done in what is going to be a very early, very, very important SEC West game.
And Ole Miss has not, look, as good as they are and they have an experienced quarterback, they have not played in a remotely hostile atmosphere so
No.
far this year. And it's going to be loud in Bryant Denny next week. Bryant Denny has a little bit of a reputation of maybe not being loud every single game. I actually think they did a pretty good job tonight. We saw Southern Miss getting a pretty fair amount of false start penalties and some issues with communication. And, that was with the crowd maybe at about let's call it a 6 or a 7. They're going to be on 10 next week. They're going to be pumped for that game. It's going to be loud in there. And that atmosphere is going to be a big tool, like you said, for Alabama.
Certainly will. Looking back just real quick to recap, offensively, got a comment there. Paul Tyson getting in the game, Jalen Milroe getting in the game, just overall balanced attack. The younger guys getting some PT, which is always huge when it comes to valuable experience moving forward.
Yeah, and Jalen Milroe with a great-looking touchdown pass late in that game. Really fun to see that from him. Couple of really nice third down throws from Paul Tyson, too. So good to see the younger guys doing some stuff and stepping up and making nice plays. But as one of our commenters, as Pamela just said here, I don't think we're going to be seeing the backups next week. I think you're going to see Bryce probably having to stay in there for 4 quarters. And, look, I think at this point you got to feel pretty good about Bryce Young. He really has made so few mistakes. He has made a lot of great decisions. He looks like a guy who doesn't get rattled easily. And I'm excited about this matchup. I don't know how you couldn't be next week to have 2 of the best players in the country, arguably the 2 Heisman frontrunners, going head to head in an afternoon CBS matchup. In Bryant Denny Stadium. Everybody's going to be pumped for it. This is the kind of game that we don't get a lot of these every year, and it's exciting to have one coming up this early in the season.
All right, guys. Alabama post-game show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. The Tide now preparing for Ole Miss. Matt, if you're in the locker room, what is Nick Saban saying to this team when they get past this 24-hour, if they even celebrate for 24 hours on this one? What is Nick Saban's message, in your opinion?
I think it's worth giving them some praise for what they did tonight. I think it was an improvement, which is what you want to see. They played a much better team last week on the road, and a lot of people would call that a more impressive achievement than what they did tonight. Sure. But I think Nick Saban would much rather see a clean game, very few mistakes, good execution, like he saw tonight. I think it's a sign that the team is learning and developing and moving towards their peak, which is exactly what you want to see heading into SEC play. And I think they're worth, it's worth giving them a confidence boost. I don't think we're at any danger of rat poison at the moment.
Not quite yet, but it's a slippery slope. It could come
quick. We'll see after next week.
Yes, the month of October. Ole Miss at home, A&M on the road, Mississippi State on the road, Tennessee at home. So those are what the next 4 weeks look like. The SEC season is here. Hopefully the fall weather continues to follow suit when it comes to getting knee-deep into the SEC schedule. But, guys, thanks so much for tuning to the Alabama Postgame Show. The Tide roll at home, 63-14, the final over Southern Miss. For Matt Scalisi, I'm Simone Eli. This is the Alabama Postgame Show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. Have a great Saturday evening.
Medical Properties Trust. At the very heart